Maggie, what an absolute honour to not only talk to you today, but also to be discussing your exceptional book, Hamnet, for our Happy Place Book Club pick of January. Can't believe it's bloody January. Maggie, how are you? You, I'm sure, are in a complete whirlwind with the ever-rolling success of this book, but also now the film being out too.
Well, it's all quite exciting. I saw it on the side of a bus for the first time today, which is quite exciting.
Yes.
And I did have to take a photo of it. My teenage daughter was really embarrassed, but I said, nobody around us knows why I'm taking this photo of a bus. It's just only you and I know.
It's so great. Oh, but it's so amazing. And the success of the film already, Jessie obviously got a Critics' Choice Award this week.
Yes,
it must
she did.
feel just, I mean, I can't even imagine having a book that you've poured your heart into, to see it brought to life in such a way must be extraordinary.
Well, I was so thrilled that Jessie won the Critics' Circle Award for Actress, because she deserves it to the moon and back. It's just so wonderful to see her incredible work being recognised. But I think I might be the luckiest author in the world, because not only has someone made a film of my book, but I had it with an amazing director, with Chloe Zhao, and with an absolute dream cast. You know, you couldn't really ask for more than Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal. And the kids, the three kids who play Susanna, Hamnet and Judith, are just jaw-droppingly brilliant. So I have to keep pinching myself. I'm going to be covered in bruises, I think, by the end of the week.
Oh, it's magical. I can't wait to watch the film. I've not seen it yet, but let's chat about the book, because not only is the Happy Place community loving it and loving discussing it and favourite parts of the book, but I have just found it such a tonic and a balm. I think it came to me late, considering it's been out for a few years now, and it came to me in the winter, so I was cozy, electric blanket on, and it's just the lovely sort of meditative cadence to it. And also, I must thank you, because what you've personally done for me is make Shakespeare as a person not intimidating. I think I was always quite intimidated by the whole subject matter of Shakespeare. I'd seen one play, Macbeth, at the Harold Pinter Theatre. It was a couple of years ago now. And that was maybe my sort of introduction properly to Shakespeare, because they had a contemporary layout, sort of contemporary clothes. It was David Tennant, who was just phenomenal as Macbeth. And for the first time I thought, maybe this is for me. Maybe I'm allowed to sort of be in this world. And I think you've taken it one step further, where obviously it's fiction, but you've got real people in this novel. And it just sent me down all of these Google rabbit holes, wanting to know more about him as a person, because although his plays are ubiquitous and have been in our world since the 1500s, Shakespeare as a person, much, much less so.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy that you say that, Fearne. That makes me really happy. I never, ever wanted to write the kind of novel that you need, an A-level in English or even a degree in English literature to understand. I didn't want it to be like that. And whenever people say to me that Shakespeare is difficult or he's elitist or, I always want to say, Shakespeare left school when he was 15. His dad was a glover. He didn't go to university. He's not like Ben Jonson or Christopher Marlowe's contemporaries. He wrote about people for the people. The capacity of the Globe Theatre was 3,000 people. Not all of those people were educated aristocrats up in the high seats. Most of them were what was called groundlings. They were just people off the streets of London who went in and they recognised themselves and they recognised their language and their jokes and all this ribaldry and, love, arguments, conflict. It was all there. So I'm always really pleased when I hear people say, I didn't think I was going to like Shakespeare, but I did, and I think I really, really wish that Shakespeare was more on the curriculum. He used to be. When I was at school, I was at comprehensive school and in the 80s, and we used to do a Shakespeare play every year from the age of 11. And I loved it. It was so exciting because you knew that you'd go from Romeo and Juliet, then you did Julius Caesar, then you did, and, it's not kids' fault, but they don't have access to that, unfortunately. It's not teachers' fault either. I just wish that, because people, if you don't get the chance to access his language and his world at that age, you do feel that it's elitist and you feel excluded from it. But then you shouldn't be.
No, I agree. And that's why I just lapped it up. And it was just so exciting. I love Tudor / Elizabethan Britain. I love visiting Hampton Court Palace and diving into that era of history. And this just felt like, actually, rather than only concentrating on the royal and the upper classes that we hear about more commonly from that era, but actually to see everyday life in the 1500s and how you've described it, it was fascinating. And I mean, your research on that part of it was extensive. You even learned how to fly a Kestrel at one point, I believe.
I did, yeah. Well, obviously there's no shortage of books about Shakespeare, so I dived into those, and I love reading about that kind of thing. And there's lots of incredible works of scholarship and biography about Shakespeare, but especially in terms of the women of the book and the children, of course, there's very, very little written. It's very little we know about them, but very little written about the life of ordinary people. And like you say, you can find out all about what it was like living in a palace or wearing clothes that a queen would wear, but you don't really, it's very hard to find out what ordinary people living, on the streets of Stratford-upon-Avon would have been like. So for that research, I did do some kind of hands-on research for that, and I did learn to fly a Kestrel, and I went to the Scottish borders and I learned to fly a Kestrel, and that was literally the most fun thing I've ever done in the name of work. I loved it. And I did come back and I said to my husband, I really want to get a Kestrel. And he
You
was
get me a Kestrel for Christmas.
No, I don't think. Also, I've got lots of cats, so it could be quite ugly.
Not great.
And and I learned how to make bread from a Tudor recipe, and I planted my own Elizabethan herb garden, because I read that every house would have had a medicinal garden to kind of treat minor ailments, and it would have been the woman of the house's responsibility to know how to use them and to cure things like colds or bruises or sprains or whatever. And I, in order to, because my world is light years, our world is light years away from the world of Agnes Shakespeare and Hamnet and Judith and Susanna. So in order to kind of inhabit their lives, I really felt like I needed to do what they did and understand what it felt like to be them. So that's why I did these things, and I went on a course to learn how to make medicines. And I did make my Tudor bread, which wasn't delicious, I have to say. It didn't go down very well with my 21st century kids.
No, I'm imagining hard. Is that right?
Bit dry, yeah. Bit
tough.
Hard. Dry.
Yeah, tough.
Yeah.
And are you using these remedies now for colds? Is it become a new part of your life?
Do you know, I do. I still make an elderberry syrup that I dose people up with if they are getting a cold. Yeah. And Scots pine, very good for chest infections if anyone's worried this winter.
You've literally turned into Agnes. It's gorgeous. I mean, let's talk about Agnes, because she's a beautiful character, and she is also getting a lot of love within our Happy Place Book Club community, but obviously globally reaching. People are talking about this character so fondly, and I guess also getting a sense that perhaps Shakespeare wouldn't have been able to do what he did and fulfill his dreams unless he'd had Agnes there as his, the sail of his ship, the engine room of his family home.
Well, I think for some strange reason, I don't really understand why, for hundreds of years now, scholars and biographers and writers of other works of fiction and plays have wanted to give Shakespeare a kind of retrospective divorce. They've wanted to really downplay his wife, who's often known as Anne Hathaway, which is mysterious in itself since her name was Shakespeare for most of her life. So they wanted to kind of downplay his marriage and say it wasn't important. And they've said things like, he didn't love her, that he had to marry her. He, regretted that he'd ever married. He ran away to London to get away from her. And there's literally no evidence at all, no documented evidence whatsoever that any of that is true. And I originally conceived the book as to be about fathers and sons, as the play Hamlet is, but I became really sidetracked and actually really quite cross about how history has treated her. And the really crystallising moment for me was when I read her father's will. So her father, Richard Hathaway, was a very successful sheep farmer, and a year before Anne married William, he died, and he left her quite a generous dowry in his will. And in the will, he refers to her as my daughter Agnes, or Agnes, as it might have been pronounced then. And that was a kind of lightning bolt moment for me, because I thought, on top of everything else, we've been calling her by the wrong name for all these years, because surely if anyone knows her real name, it's going to be her dad. So that was it felt like a gift as well for a novelist, because I thought, okay, I'm going to ask readers to forget everything they think they know about Anne Hathaway, and I want them to meet Agnes Shakespeare.
Yes. Oh, it's a gift for all of us. And I mean, I guess we can see this throughout history in so many ways that women are often vilified. I wrote a tiny section on a non-fiction that I'm releasing myself in March about how women are often either downplayed in history. Certainly, we can see that in literature and art. You know, name a famous female painter, it's pretty bloody hard. But equally, even people that we all know, like Marie Antoinette or Mary I, they're sort of overly vilified more than their male counterparts. And I'm wondering if this is just history, guys, and the patriarchy.
I don't know. I don't really know the reason why people have been so keen to sideline her. I mean, very, very little is known about her. We don't even have a record of her birth because she was born before records began in her particular village. But it's almost as if I don't know whether there's a really strong desire for our male artists to be footloose and fancy free. But, for me, there are two really important documented things about Shakespeare. One that was that all the money he earned in London, and he earned a lot. He was a very, very good businessman as well as being a pretty good playwright. He sent all of that money back to Stratford-upon-Avon, and he lived in very modest lodgings in London while he was there. And also at the end of his career, he could have lived anywhere he wanted when he left. He retired from the stage, but he chose to go back to Stratford-upon-Avon and live with his wife. Which neither of those things speak to me of somebody who regretted his marriage or hated his wife.
Yeah, completely. I mean, certainly some fury has fueled your writing of this character in the most positive way. And I'm imagining with Agnes and Hamnet, I'm assuming you felt a sense of responsibility with these real people and turning them into fiction and how you might be moving them through that world. How heavily did that weigh on your mind during the writing process?
It did, definitely. And I think if you are going to choose to write fiction about people who were real, even if they lived, 500 years ago, you do have a responsibility to them. And you've got to remember that their bones are still in the churchyard. They were real. These names are real. The scenario, the houses, the lives, as much as you can find out are real. So I absolutely made it a hard and fast rule that I needed to find out as much as I possibly could. And even if I found out something that didn't fit with the novel that I wanted to write, I had to, I couldn't just pretend I hadn't read that book. I had to incorporate it in. And also, I knew that when I'd finished the book, I wanted to use some of the money I got for it for making a memorial for Hamnet, because he doesn't have a gravestone, and neither does Judith. And we know that they're buried in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, but there's no marker of their grave. So that's what I did. After COVID, after lockdown, the church in Stratford-upon-Avon were brilliant, and they said, yes, we can't have a gravestone because we don't know where he is, but there are now 2 rowan trees and 2 plaques, one for Hamnet and one for Judith, in the churchyard. And that was really important to me, to make a real marker of those 2 people.
Oh my God. I mean, I can't imagine. That must have been deeply emotional to go there and see the memorials.
Yeah, it really was.
Wow.
And the vicar of Holy Trinity gave a whole dedication and gave a whole kind of service for Hamnet and Judith. It was incredible.
Wow.
I mean, I was tearing up. And so many people turned up, and apparently now tour groups take them people there, and so it's fabulous. And but the brilliant Annie, who runs the literary festival there, occasionally sends me photographs, and the trees are growing and they're thriving, and they bring out beautiful berries. Judith's are pink and Hamlet's are red.
That's breaking my heart. It's too gorgeous. What a beautiful thing to do. You write about grief, love, loss, everyday life in the most exceptional and beautiful way. The cadence of the book, as I said, I find it very meditative to read these often short, swift sentences. It's like you're there in real time. It's probably the closest I've felt to watching a film whilst reading, because the pace is sort of constant, and these beautiful little vignettes that you get because of that pace. How much was that thought out before you started writing, or with your books, does the pace, the cadence, the style come with the story as you're writing it?
I think it comes. I'm not much of a planner in writing or in life, actually. I don't know if that shocks you, Fearne, but I do know that there are writers out there who will plan everything meticulously, chapter by chapter, before they even start to write the book. But I don't do that. I tend to kind of dive in and just write a scene here and a scene there and see how it feels. Always feel that I leave that kind of decision about style and grammar and voice up to what I think Rudyard Kipling called the other side of his head. I think the story will tell you what it needs. And there have been times when I've been writing a book and it's in kind of, I don't know, the first person. It's, you know, I said or I sat, and then something will feel wrong. It's a bit like walking around in shoes that are too tight. And I will look at it and I'll think, actually, you know what? This is wrong. This needs to be past tense. This needs to be third person. So I did once, actually, there was a book I wrote called The Hand That First Held Mine, and I realised I'd done that. So I had to spend a really boring fortnight changing every I to she, and yeah, but I had to do it. It was wrong. So I think you need to, I think I'm just one of those writers who I need to be actually doing it before I know, that's the only way I find out what it is. I need to get in there.
And I guess, you know, being intuitive and following your gut is imperative. And I think that's really wonderful for people to hear, keen writers out there, that there isn't this sort of set of rules that you have to follow to write well. It's going with what feels good to you. I mean, there are rules, obviously. You have to be good at it. But I mean, if you're in the flow of it, intuition is really meaningful in the writing process.
I think for me, and I think everybody does it differently. Every single writer I ever speak to, everybody has their own process. And every book, I think, is very different as well. You know, I think in a way you've got to let the book teach you what it needs. You know, I think just because you've written one book doesn't mean actually that you know how to write the next book, because you can know how to write that book, the one you finished, but the next one you've got to learn about it all over. It's a bit like having children. You know, when I had one child, I thought you learn so much, and the second child I thought, okay, I know about this, and I think, oh wow, it's a completely different human being.
Yeah, it's a different person.
This is
how does this work?
Different person. Yeah, I've got to relearn it. So I think books are like that as well. But I think the thing that I really wish someone had said to me when I was starting out writing is that you don't have to begin at the beginning. You know, you don't have to set out your stall and establish your character and work it all out, and then, you know, you start to sing. You can just give it a try. I think there's huge comfort in word count, and you can never, ever make a blank page into anything other than a blank page. But bad writing, you can make into good writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the first bit is moving past the fear of, can I do this or not? Once you're in, you're in. I mean, I've written a lot more non-fiction than I have fiction. I've written one novel and I'm in the middle of writing one at the moment. But I have probably more with my non-fiction learned a lot about myself through the process of writing. And I wonder what this particular fiction taught you about yourself, if there were any moments where scenes were playing out with characters where it led you to some sort of introspection.
I think the vertigo I had before writing Hamnet was worse than for any other book that I've written, possibly. And actually, I put off starting it for years, partly because I was really superstitious that I couldn't write it until my own son was past the age of 11. But also that I just kept thinking, I'd think, I love this idea, I love it. And then I would think, oh my God, who writes a novel about Shakespeare? That's a terrible idea. So, you know, I would kind of come close and I think, no, I can't. And then I'd have it again. And I actually wrote 3 other books so as not to write Hamnet.
Wow.
And then I look back when I kind of finished, I wrote a memoir and I finished my memoir and I sort of gave myself a talking to, and I said, you know, either you have to give this a go, or you've just got to forget about it. You can't keep on buying more books about Shakespeare and then changing your mind.
Yeah.
So I just thought, I just need to plunge in. I just need to do it. And I knew that I had to start with Hamnet. It had to be putting the boy front and centre. And so I just wrote this thing one day that just said a boy's coming down a flight of stairs. And somehow it was, I don't know, it was like a key turning in the lock. It was the right time in my life and it was the right point in the story. And it was like, you know, I did. And that's partly why I don't name Shakespeare in the book, just because, I mean, partly because I wanted people to see him as a human, not as a literary icon, but also because I literally could not write a sentence like William Shakespeare came down the stairs and had breakfast. I just think, oh my God, what am I doing? So I just had to do away with the whole name.
But I think that's what, for me, made it not intimidating, because you were seeing him as a son, as a lover, as a father. And it was like, oh yeah, he was a human. He isn't just this sort of, you know, we can all picture what he looks like, that iconic image. It gave me a completely new perspective on him as a person. And what I love about from the interviews I've watched with you talking about Hamnet is that this idea has actually been percolating a lot longer than 3 books written in between. This was something that was initiated in an English class at school where you learned about Hamnet from your brilliant English teacher, and it's stuck in your brain. I mean, that's extraordinary.
No, it is. I had an extraordinary teacher at school, Mr. Henderson, he called. And I'm not saying that age 16 I heard about the existence of Hamnet and I thought, one day I'm going to write a novel. But I was just instantly fascinated by the similarity of the names. And even though I was a really long way from being a writer and a mother, I knew that it was significant. You know, I knew that nobody would casually give the name of their dead son to a play and a prince and a ghost, that it had to mean something.
Yeah, but my God, thank God it stayed with you and that it just slowly gained momentum and ended up as this book. There's if I had a week with you, I would read all the bits I've underlined, but one bit I wanted to read out is this the right page? Yes. The sexiest paragraph ever written. Ready for this?
Okay, why not? Let's go for it, Fearne.
Okay. I'm not going to read it in a sexy voice because that would be mega cringe. And now there is this fit. It is altogether unlike anything she has felt before. It makes her think of a hand drawing on a glove, of a lamb slithering wet from a ewe, an axe splitting open a log, a key turning in an oiled lock. Oh, I had to pause after reading that. I was like, how is an axe splitting a log sexy? I don't understand how you've done it.
Depends who's wielding the axe, Fearne, really,
well,
isn't
it? Quite. We could all picture someone hunky wielding the axe. But I'm wondering, because I'm so obsessed with language, and when people nail a feeling from words, it's just the best thing when you read something and it's visceral rather than just you're skimming through sentences. With moments like that, do you have these moments of sort of, I don't know, divine inspiration where it just lands, like you've downloaded it, it's coming out? Or is that a moment where you have to sit and think, what is the most unusual, off-centre way of describing something that we've read in books for hundreds of years?
I think it's a mixture of both. And I think sex scenes are tricky. They are hard because you don't want to make it cringy, and you can't. I always think you can't be too medical about it, and I don't believe in using kind of euphemisms like manhood or, those are the worst and the most cringe things. So you've got to avoid that, but you've also got to avoid the kind of word that a doctor might use, because that just...
No one wants to hear vagina used or vulva in a sex scene.
Yeah, it's just not quite there. So it's got to be, and you don't want to be too metaphorical and too kind of wimpish about it. So it's tricky. It's a fine line to tread, and you have to think about it really carefully. My son told me when he was a teenager, his friends two of them would pin him down and another one of them would read aloud the sex scenes that I'd written to him. I mean, poor lad. I know, isn't that just the worst thing you've ever heard? I said to him, I'm so sorry that I feel like it's my fault that that's happened to you. But he's fine.
That's so great.
As far as I know.
The bit I've just read aloud, out of context, could be anything.
It could. I know, exactly. It could be. So yeah, I hope I haven't damaged him for life. I don't think I have.
It's so great. But it's so beautiful. It's like poetry, and God, I can only hope that a sentence that amazing comes out of my brain one day. It's just, I love how you use words. It's heaven, absolute heaven.
Thank you.
Now, I know that you are insanely busy with, as I said, the continued success of the book and the film out. So you are now free to leave your screen, Maggie O'Farrell. But thank you so much for talking to us today. And we just have loved having your book as our pick for this month.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.